Our US President Donald Trump doubling down on claims of total obliteration to Iranian nuclear sites as he meets leaders of the NATO bloc. Although the American leader said US strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear, or rather the intelligence of those strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities was inconclusive, the strikes themselves caused severe damage and set back Tehran's nuclear program by decades. It's in stark contrast to leaked assessment from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency, which estimated the attack set the program back by just a few months. Mr. Trump yesterday had some harsh words for arch foes Israel and Iran, accusing them of breaching the ceasefire after it was reached. He stood by those comments as necessary.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like 2 kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
The Defense Alliance is wrapping up 2 days of talks on boosting spending on defense, centered on Mr. Trump's demand for the bloc to do more. And for more, we're joined by Ross Cullen at The Hague in the Netherlands. Ross, discussions wrapping up, of course, the key question and suggestions that some agreement has been reached. Any clarity on a hike in target on defense spending?
Well, Mark Rutte will be holding his closing news conference shortly. We do understand, hopefully, there could be, and as far as NATO is concerned, that agreement on national governments agreeing, the members of the alliance, to raise the amounts that they are going to be spending on defence, that share of GDP to 5%, made up of 3.5% on core military operations and 1.5% on defence-related activities. But it'll be interesting to watch the wording of the closing communique, that final declaration we are expecting after the end of the Secretary-General's news conference, for the wording, the way that they are going to be able to accommodate divergent members like Spain, who are very reluctant to sign up to that 5% of GDP target. So it'll be interesting to see that in terms of Mark Rutte, and also if they've managed to agree on a timeline. Our country is expected to adjust their budgets to increase the share of GDP in 5 years, 10, 15 years as well. So we're watching for any further clarification from the Secretary-General on that 5% overall figure, on Spain's position and on the timelines.
Concern about this, about focus, keeping focus on this defense spending target. There were concerns that perhaps what was happening in the Middle East might detract from it. President Trump doubling down earlier on his claims about the impact of U.S. strikes on the weekend on Iran's nuclear facilities. How did those strikes and the subsequent ceasefire affect discussions taking place at NATO?
Well, that was certainly an issue during the G7 summit in Canada earlier this month, when President Trump's focus seemed to be more on what was happening in the Middle East, leaving that gathering of world leaders early. And Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General, wanted to make sure there was no chance of President Trump leaving this gathering of NATO members early. But there was a lot of discussion about what's been happening between Iran and Israel. Certainly those harsh words, the swear words that President Trump used in Washington just on his departure from the US to come here to the Netherlands. But he doubled down on his criticism of certain US media outlets earlier here in The Hague, saying that 3 of them, CNN, MSNBC and the New York Times, were, in his opinion, quote, scum. He was saying that they should be celebrating the raids that the US carried out on Iran, not promoting and publishing the leaked intelligence from the Pentagon, suggesting that perhaps the impact of those US strikes was not as big as the US government has been portraying. So certainly we had that side in terms of Iran, Israel coming to the fore, and there will also be meetings later between President Trump and President Zelensky. So the war in Ukraine will also come back to be a particular point of focus.
Ross, we've heard Mr. Trump come out the last few hours with some positive words on President Zelensky. Does it signal a more positive outcome from this meeting today between these two leaders?
Yeah, the last time they met was on the sidelines of Pope Francis's funeral in the Vatican City in April, and that was a cordial meeting. But if you cast your mind back to February in the White House, President Trump, President Zelensky and US Vice President J.D. Vance falling out in front of the world's media, a shouting match, acrimony in front of the TV cameras which were rolling. That really was disastrous in terms of Ukraine and disastrous for Ukraine's allies as well. They're hoping that this time round, meeting on the sidelines of NATO, there will be more support for Ukraine. There are bipartisan US senators travelling here in the Netherlands as well as part of a Senate Foreign Relations Committee grouping, and they've been saying just over the last couple of days that there is deep bipartisan support in the US for Ukraine. We know that there is the importance to continue to support Ukraine, the importance of President Trump tightening sanctions on Russia, they have said. So President Zelensky will certainly be pushing the US leader to see if there is any imposition of further sanctions from the US. We know that the EU has been putting in place its 18th round of restrictions on Russia. President Zelensky will want to see if the US can do the same.
Oh, thanks. That Ross Cullen live there from The Hague. We're looking forward to that press statement from the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, perhaps about 22 minutes from now. Ross Cullen from The Hague.